Which survival foods are easiest to prepare? Which survival foods need special care? And why does this matter? Well, if you're planning your pantry, you want to make sure that you have at least some of them that are pretty easy to make, because you may be looking for those easy foods when a disaster comes. So having a good variety, knowing which ones are easier to prepare, and it's going to depend on you and your own preps, but these are things that I've considered in general to be ones that are easy to, some of them are ready to eat. You'd be amazed with how much stuff you can eat without cooking it at all if you needed to. Some of it you're just cooking it for, just to be able to cook it, because it's better that way. It's tastier. You prefer the taste of it cooked. You're accustomed to it being cooked. But some of these foods don't really need to be cooked. You can actually eat many of them, just open the package and eat them. And that's good to know as well, because if you have a problem with your cooking system, or you have some other problems in preparing your food, some of your other preps failed, that might be something to consider. Going for an easier food. Those might be the ones that you're able to eat. So let's start taking a look at these guys. So ready-to-eat foods would be things like emergency food bars are great as ready-to-eat foods. Certain MRE contents, like the muffins and the snacks and many of those things, most of the things usually except for the entree, are ready to eat and could be very easily made ready. The crackers with the cheese, that you just put them together. That takes very little preparation to make that. There's a lot of MRE contents that are just ready to eat. Most vacuum sealed foods are ready to eat when they're vacuum sealed. There are some exceptions, but many vacuum sealed foods you can just eat them. Now most dehydrated foods you don't really need to rehydrate them. You can eat them. You can eat, I've done carrots, I've done apple chips. That's a dehydrated food. You could rehydrate them and get your, turn them back kind of into an apple slice thing, or you could eat them as they are as apple chips. Now if you are eating dehydrated foods, then you want to make sure that you compensate for that water. You're not getting the moisture in your food. Your food may actually be trying to take the moisture out. So make sure that you watch your water consumption. Make sure that you're getting appropriate water while you're eating dehydrated foods. However, canned foods are the opposite. A lot of times those are water packed and whatnot. And those guys, most canned foods can be eaten straight out of the can. Including chili beans and refried beans and many of those things. They can be. Many of them were cooked before they were ever put in there. They've been sealed in there. They're fine. You can even get some canned meats that are already pre-cooked in the can. Much of that is already pre-cooked in the process of canning or just before the canning. So most canned foods, even though you prefer your ravioli heated, you can eat it straight out of the can if you had to. It should be fine. Sugar, that's ready to be used right away. Honey is actually, that's more of a food. Now sugar is kind of like on spices. You're going to want to probably put that with something else. But with honey, you can actually eat that by the spoonful. I wouldn't make a whole meal out of honey, but if you needed a quick snack, you could take a spoonful or a few of honey. That would work. But oatmeal is also usable as it is. That's what they make like granola bars and stuff like that out of too. You can take that oatmeal, and if you wanted to, you could make, with a little bit of preparation, you could mix peanut butter with that. They also make peanut butter powder, and so you can make yourself your own oatmeal type bar. So those are options as well. And so that's ready to eat. That you crack open the canister, they're ready to go. Let's take a look at the easier foods. To make the full MRE, the entree is on the easy category. It's usually just designed to be heated, and it comes with an MRE heater in the MRE. So that's super easy. You just add water to the MRE heater, and it heats up. I don't expect to be demonstrating anything other than production of MREs and my own custom MREs. As far as the MREs that you're going to purchase, I didn't see any menus up there, so I don't have anything stockpiled on MREs. So I won't really be demonstrating that, but the concept of using the MRE heater is you put some water up to the fill line, and the pad reacts with the water and produces heat, and it's able to cook your food. So you put your food, you open up the food envelope, the plastic envelope, and put that inside, pour the water down in there, and it starts to heat. Make sure it's out in the ventilated area. You don't want to breathe what's coming off of that, and then it will cook your food for you. So, but you could actually probably eat it without cooking it. I think a lot of those things are already pre-cooked, but they are meant to be, you know, that extra hot meal, that extra hot entree. So that's an easier food. A lot of freeze-dried foods, you just add hot water to it. Really easy there. Most powders, you mix them either with cold or hot water. Sometimes you need milk. In that case, they make milk powder, so you can mix the milk powder with the water, dried milk with the water, create milk, and then mix it if you did need milk for those powders. Most of the time it's either water, most of the time it's water, sometimes it's milk. Very rarely do they ask for it to be anything else that you mix that powder with. But know your powders too, and label them, because different powders can look similar. You know, it's hard to tell baking soda from baking powder. You know, there's different things that can just, and cornstarch could blend right in with both of those. Flour, depending on the type of flour, some of those flours or sugars can be difficult to distinguish, so make sure they're well labeled. But most of those powders are pretty easy to prepare. Mix them with some. Now, flour is not in the easy list. Continue on. You don't want to eat flour straight. But most powders are. Now, instant mashed potatoes, that's also another one that is very easy. You mix it with some hot water and let it stand. Let it expand, let it stand. Super easy. Just make those in just a few minutes. Pasta noodles, you boil those in water. They're pretty easy to do. Boil them in water and they turn soft and they're edible. But you do want to cook them. Now, intermediate foods deals more with your rice, your beans, and your flour. Rice, you generally want to cook that boiling it, but it is, you got to be careful with how you do it. I know I ruined a pan once with it. Didn't just ruin the rice, I ruined the pan. Took me years to get that pan back, but I did, because it was a favorite pan, and I got it back. My grandma's old pan, so I made it right again. But rice can be messed up. It is good to practice it. If you haven't made rice, it would be good to practice it before you have to fall back on your rice stockpile. But for the most part, I'm going to make a video on rice on this channel. I do absolutely intend to make one. Beans as well. Those can be a little more tricky than the easier foods to make, but you do want to definitely soak them and definitely cook them. And flour, you definitely need to cook. You need to cook your flour. If you've got grain, that's going to take a little bit more work, because then you're going to be grinding that down into a flour. But flour, to be able to make that into anything, to make that into biscuits or tortillas or whatever you want to do, that's something that you're going to need to look into. Make sure you have recipes for those. Make sure you've practiced those foods. And there are harder foods to make that you can use as a combination with different things. You know, making a rice and bean tortilla, you know, now you're dealing with several intermediate foods and you've got to combine them. I would call that a little bit more advanced, a little bit harder to do. But these are things to consider with your food when you're going to stockpile this. You know, figure out make sure you have some easy foods on hand, because you might not feel up. You might be feeling ill or whatever else, and you might not be able to make the harder foods. So, just a consideration. Thank you for watching.